Hey, my name's Ryan Javante. I'm 26, and just a few months ago, I went through a quiet breakup that changed everything for me. My ex, Lily, ended things because she said I was too safe, too bland. She wanted excitement, adventure, things I guess I wasn't giving her. It stung, but it didn't destroy me. Instead, it pushed me to pack up my life in Minneapolis and move to a small suburb called Maple Grove, Minnesota. It's the kind of place where the streets are lined with maple trees that turn fiery red in the fall, and everyone knows their neighbors' names, even if they don't always talk much. I figured it was exactly what I needed, a fresh start, away from the noise of the city, where I could rebuild myself without any expectations. I found a small wooden house to rent on a quiet street. Nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom with a porch and a backyard that needed some work. I spent my first weekends there painting the walls a soft gray, fixing creaky floorboards, and turning it into something that felt like mine. During the week, I commuted to a mid-sized architecture firm in the nearby town, drafting plans for residential buildings. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and let me focus on the details, which suited me. Evenings were simple. I'd read a book, maybe watch an old movie on TV, or just sit on the porch with a beer, listening to the crickets. I wasn't looking for love or drama. I just wanted peace. That peace held steady until I met Elena Morrison, my neighbor from across the street. Her house was a cozy blue cottage with white curtains that always fluttered in the breeze and a garden out front that she tended to religiously. I first noticed her one crisp autumn afternoon while I was raking leaves in my yard. She was out there too, struggling with an old lawnmower that kept sputtering and dying. She was around 40 with her hair tied up in a loose ponytail, wearing jeans and a faded green sweater. There was something about her face. Soft features, a strong jawline, and eyes that held a quiet sadness, but also a warmth that drew you in. She didn't look her age. She could have passed for someone in her early 30s with that effortless grace some people just have. I watched for a moment, then called out, "Need a hand with that?" She looked up, startled, wiping sweat from her forehead. Her eyes met mine, and she hesitated before nodding. "If you don't mind, this thing's been fighting me all day." I crossed the street, toolbox in hand, and knelt down to check the mower. It was a simple fix. The spark plug was fouled. 10 minutes later, it roared to life. She smiled, a real one that reached her eyes, and insisted on rewarding me with a glass of homemade lemonade. "I'm Elena," she said, handing me the glass on her porch. "I teach English literature at the local high school. Just moved here full-time after some changes." We chatted for a bit. She told me she'd been married for 20 years to a guy named Mark, but they'd separated recently. "It wasn't dramatic," she said softly. "We just grew apart. No big fights, no scandals. Just two people who stopped seeing each other." There was a sadness in her voice, but she didn't dwell on it. Instead, she asked about me, why I'd moved, what I did. I kept it light, mentioning the breakup without going into details. By the time I headed back home, I felt a strange pull toward her house, like it was more alive than the others on the street. After that, we started talking more. It began innocently enough. Mornings, I'd wave if I saw her on her porch with coffee, and sometimes she'd invite me over for a cup. We'd sit there discussing books. She loved the classics like Jane Austen and F. Scott Fitzgerald, while I was more into Hemingway and modern thrillers. "You have a way of seeing the world that's refreshing," she'd say with a laugh. Afternoons, if I was out fixing something in my yard, she'd come over with advice on plants or just to chat. One day, I helped her repair a flickering porch light. Another, we raked leaves together in her backyard, the air filled with the earthy scent of fall. I learned more about her over those weeks. She had a daughter, Sophie, who was 24 and living in Chicago, working as a journalist. Elena spoke of her with pride, but there was a loneliness in her tone when she mentioned how quiet the house felt now. Her marriage had been steady but empty toward the end. Mark had been a good provider, but the spark had faded years ago. She didn't complain, she just shared, and I listened. In return, I opened up about Lily, how her words had made me question if I was capable of real passion. Elena would tilt her head and say, "You're not bland, Ryan. You're thoughtful, that's rare." The shift happened on a sunny Saturday. Elena had just gotten back from the grocery store, her arms full of bags. I jogged over to help, carrying them into her kitchen. As we unpacked apples, bread, a bottle of wine, she thanked me again. We were laughing about something silly, the way neighbors do when I glanced at her. The sunlight caught her hair, and for a moment she looked timeless. Without thinking, I said, "You know, if you were a few years younger, I'd probably ask you out to dinner tonight." She paused, setting down a jar of jam, and looked at me with those deep, searching eyes. The air thickened, and then she smiled, a mix of surprise and something bolder. "Well," she said softly, "why don't you pretend I'm younger?" The words hung there, electric. My heart pounded in my chest. Her smile lingered, challenging yet hopeful, and I felt the world tilt just a little. Just then, Mrs. Chun, the nosy neighbor from next door, a stern woman in her 60s who always seemed to be watching, walked by with her dog, her eyes narrowing at us through the open door. Elena noticed too and chuckled lightly. "Better come inside," she said, stepping back. "Otherwise the whole street will be gossiping about us for a month." I followed her in, the door clicking shut behind me. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying her words over and over. "Why don't you pretend I'm younger?" It had started as a joke, but it didn't feel like one anymore. Something had shifted, and I couldn't ignore it. From that moment on, everything felt different, even if on the surface our routine stayed the same. I'd wake up early, make coffee, and glance across the street at Elena's blue cottage, wondering if she'd be out on her porch. Most mornings she was, waving me over with a mug in hand. We'd sit there like before, talking about books or the changing leaves, but now there was an undercurrent, a shared secret in her words, a lingering look that made my pulse quicken. "Pretend I'm younger," she'd said. It had been a joke, or at least it started that way, but it hung between us like an invitation neither of us knew how to accept. One morning, about a week later, I crossed the street with my own coffee in hand. She was there, dressed in a simple cardigan over jeans, her hair loose around her shoulders. We chatted about a novel she'd lent me, the one about lost love in the 1920s, and she laughed at my take on the ending. But as I got up to leave, she touched my arm lightly. "Ryan," she said, her voice softer, "about what I said the other day. I didn't mean to make things awkward." I shook my head. It wasn't awkward, it was honest. She smiled, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "Good, because I like our mornings." Those small moments built up. I'd find excuses to help around her place, like when her porch light started flickering again after a rainstorm. I grabbed my tools and fixed it while she watched from the doorway. "You don't have to do this," she said, echoing her words from before. I looked up from the wiring. "I want to." She leaned against the frame, arms crossed. "Not many people keep their word like that, Ryan. It's refreshing." We ended up sitting on the steps afterward, the evening air cool, talking about nothing and everything. She shared more about her marriage, how it had started with passion but faded into routine, how Mark had been kind but distant in the end. "I don't regret it," she said. "It gave me Sophie, but sometimes I wonder if that's all there is." I opened up too, telling her about Lily in more detail, how her leaving had made me question if I was capable of the kind of excitement someone might want. Elena listened, her gaze steady. "You're not bland," she replied. "You're steady. That's what the world needs more of." Her hand brushed mine as she said it, just for a second, and neither of us pulled away right away. It was electric, that touch, but we both pretended it was nothing. Still, the neighborhood started to notice. Maple Grove was small, the kind of place where people talked over fences and at the corner store. Mrs. Chun was the first to make it obvious. One afternoon, as I was leaving Elena's after helping her move some boxes from the attic, the old woman walked by with her dog, her eyes narrowing like she was piecing together a puzzle. "You two seem friendly," she said, her tone laced with something sharp. I nodded politely. "Just being neighborly." She harumphed and kept walking, but I could feel her gaze on my back. At work it crept in too. My colleague Jake, a guy in his 30s who'd been with the firm longer than me, caught me spacing out during a meeting. "What's got you smiling like that?" he teased later in the break room. "New girl?" I shrugged it off, but he pressed. "Heard from a buddy in town you've been spending time with that teacher across from you. Elena, right? She's older, huh? Hot, though." His grin was half joking, half curious, and it made my stomach twist. "We're friends," I said flatly. He raised his hands. "Hey, no judgment. Just saying, small town, people talk." Elena felt it too. A few days later, over coffee, she set her mug down with a sigh. "Mrs. Chun stopped by yesterday. Asked if I needed help with all the work you're doing around here." Her laugh was forced. "I know it's harmless, but it reminds me how people see things. A woman my age with a younger man? They assume it's loneliness or foolishness." I met her eyes. "And what do you think?" She paused, stirring her coffee slowly. "I think sometimes all you need is someone genuine. But that doesn't stop the whispers." We both hesitated more after that. There were days when I'd wave from my porch but not cross the street, giving us space. She'd text instead of call, simple things like "good book recommendation." But the pull was there, stronger now. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky orange, we sat on her porch swing. She turned to me, her voice quiet. "Ryan, have you thought about the future? When you're 30, I'll be 50. When you're 50, I'll be nearly 70. That's reality." I nodded, feeling the weight of it. "I think about it every day. But I think about you more. About how you make me feel alive, not just safe." She looked away toward the darkening street. "I feel the same. But society doesn't make it easy. They see the age, not the connection." We sat in silence for a while, the swing creaking softly. Her hand found mine again, fingers intertwining tentatively. "What if we just keep pretending for a little longer?" she whispered. I squeezed her hand. "As long as you want." But the pretending felt thinner each day. The whispers grew louder in my mind, and I could see the toll on her. The way her shoulders tensed when someone walked by, the forced smiles at the grocery store. One morning, as I watched her from my window, standing alone on her porch with her coffee gone cold, I crossed the street without thinking. "You okay?" I asked. She looked up, her eyes tired but warm. "I don't know, Ryan. I just know I don't want to lose these mornings." The vulnerability in her voice hit me hard, and in that moment I realized we couldn't pretend forever. Something had to give. The whispers turned into a storm faster than I could have imagined. It started small, like a ripple in a pond, but in a town like Maple Grove, ripples become waves. About 2 weeks after Elena's quiet admission that she didn't want to lose our mornings, we decided to venture out for coffee at a little diner on the edge of town. Not our usual porch ritual, but something normal, something couples do. We sat in a booth by the window, laughing over pancakes and refills, her hand brushing mine across the table. It felt right, natural. But someone, a colleague of hers from the high school I later learned, snapped a photo on their phone. By the next day, it had made its way into the staff group chat, then to a few parents, and from there it spread like wildfire through the neighborhood. Elena called me that evening, her voice tight. "Ryan, have you heard? They're talking." I hadn't, but when I checked my phone, there were messages from Jake at work. "Dude, is that you with the teacher?" Spill. Even a vague one from an old acquaintance in town. "Heard you're keeping busy with the neighbor lady. Bold move." I drove over to her place right away. She opened the door, looking more tired than I'd ever seen her, her eyes rimmed with red. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. We sat in her living room, the curtains drawn against the darkening sky. "At school today," she started. "A few teachers gave me the cold shoulder in the lounge. One even asked if I was going through a phase. And the kids." I overheard some whispering in the hallway. "Mrs. Morrison's dating a younger guy." It's humiliating. I reached for her hand, but she pulled back slightly, not in rejection, but in hesitation. "I thought I was stronger than this," she whispered. "I've dealt with judgment before. During the separation from Mark, people pitied me, said I must have done something wrong. But this feels different, like I'm on display." I nodded, feeling the anger bubble up in my chest. Not at her, but at the town, at the small-mindedness that turned something beautiful into gossip fodder. "What about you?" she asked. "Your work friends?" I told her about Jake's texts, how the guys in the office had started ribbing me during lunch breaks. They call it a cougar thing, like it's a joke. But it's not funny to me. The pressure built over the next few days. Mrs. Chun escalated from glares to outright comments. One afternoon, as I was mowing my lawn, she stopped by her fence and called out, "You know, young man, people are saying things. A woman her age, it's not proper." I turned off the mower, wiping sweat from my brow. "With all due respect, Mrs. Chun, it's none of anyone's business." She shook her head and walked away, but her words lingered like a bad taste. At the firm, the teasing turned sharper. My boss, a guy in his 50s named Tom, pulled me aside after a meeting. "Heard some rumors, Ryan. Just make sure it doesn't affect your work. Small town, reputations matter." I assured him it wouldn't, but inside I felt the walls closing in. Elena bore the worst of it. Parents at school started questioning her focus, and one even requested their kid be moved to another English class. She came home one day in tears, collapsing onto her couch as I held her. "I feel like I'm losing everything again," she said, her voice breaking. "My job, my respect, all because I dared to feel something real." We talked for hours that night, the room lit only by a lamp in the corner. She opened up about the deeper fears, the ones she'd hinted at before. "Society sees us and thinks I'm desperate. Or you're naive. What if they're right? What if this blows up and I end up alone? Worse than before?" I pulled her close. "They're not right. This is real. But if it's too much, if you need space..." A heavy rain started that evening, pounding against the windows like it mirrored the turmoil inside us. Around midnight, there was a knock at my door. Urgent, insistent. I opened it to find Elena standing there, soaked to the bone, her hair plastered to her face, eyes wild with emotion. "Ryan," she said, stepping inside without waiting. Water dripped from her coat onto the floor. "I can't do this anymore, the pretending, the hiding, but I also can't let go." Her voice cracked. "We should stop. For both our sakes. Let the gossip die down." My heart sank, a cold wave washing over me. I closed the door, turning to her. "If that's what you need, I'll walk away. But don't say it if it's not what you want." She looked at me, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "It's not what I want. God, Ryan, you're the first person in years who's made me feel seen, not just tolerated. But I'm scared. Of losing you, of the judgment, of what this could do to us." I stepped closer, taking her cold hands in mine. "Then let's face it together. No more pretending." She searched my eyes, and in that moment, something broke free. She leaned in, and we kissed. Not tentatively like before, but with the weight of everything we'd held back. It was a kiss born of storm and surrender, her hands clutching my shirt as if anchoring herself. When we pulled apart, she whispered, "I'd rather be with you one day sincerely than many years living in pretense." "No, wait, that's not right." She said, "I'd rather have one real day with you than years of pretending." We stayed up all night, wrapped in blankets on the couch, pouring out our souls. She talked about the emptiness of her marriage, the fear of being alone forever, the spark she'd thought was gone until I showed up. I shared my own insecurities, the breakup that made me doubt myself, the way she made me feel bold for the first time. By dawn, as the rain eased, she looked at me with a new resolve. "If we're brave enough for this," she said, "let's step into the light. Let them talk. We'll show them what real means." I nodded, pulling her close again. No more hiding. As the sun rose, painting the sky in soft pinks, Elena stood by the window, her silhouette strong against the light. She turned to me, her smile tentative but true. "Today we go out for breakfast. Let Maple Grove see us." My heart raced, but I smiled back. Together. I knew the storm wasn't over, the gossip would rage on, the stares would continue, but in that moment we had chosen each other. And that was enough to face whatever came next. From that dawn promise to step into the light, Elena and I didn't waste time. We started small but deliberate, testing the waters of our new reality. The very next morning, we walked hand in hand to the local diner for breakfast, the same one where the photo had sparked the gossip. Heads turned as we entered. Mrs. Chun was there with her coffee group, her eyebrows shooting up like arrows. A few regulars whispered, but we ignored them, ordering eggs and toast like it was any other day. Elena squeezed my hand under the table. "This feels good," she whispered. "Scary, but good." I nodded, feeling the same mix of nerves and exhilaration. By the time we left paying the bill together, the stares had softened a bit. Or maybe we just cared less. Over the following weeks, we leaned into it. We went grocery shopping at the town's only supermarket, pushing a cart side by side, debating over apples or oranges like any couple. An older woman from Elena's school glanced our way in the produce aisle, her expression a blend of surprise and disapproval, but Elena just smiled politely and kept walking. "Let them look," she said later, unpacking bags in her kitchen. "We're not hiding anymore." Evenings, we'd eat out at the Italian place on Main Street, sharing pasta and wine, our fingers intertwined on the table. The waiter, a young guy named Chris who'd gone to her high school classes years ago, hesitated at first but eventually joked, "You two make a cute pair, Ms. Morrison." She laughed, the sound freer than I'd heard before. The backlash didn't vanish overnight, but it evolved. At work, Jake and the others shifted from outright teasing to more subdued comments. "You're really going for it, huh?" Jake said one day in the break room. "Respect, man. Takes guts." I shrugged. "It's not about guts. It's about her." Tom, my boss, never brought it up again after that initial warning, and I threw myself into projects to prove it wasn't distracting me. Elena faced tougher scrutiny at school. A few colleagues remained distant, skipping her in lunch invites, but others warmed up. Lisa, a younger English teacher in her 30s, pulled her aside one day. "I admire what you're doing," she confided. "It takes courage to choose happiness over what people think." Elena told me about it that night, her eyes shining. "It's starting to feel like I'm not alone in this." The real test came when Sophie arrived. Elena had mentioned her daughter would visit from Chicago for a weekend, and I'd been nervous about it since our decision to go public. Sophie was 24, sharp-witted, with her mother's eyes and a no-nonsense attitude honed from her journalism job. She pulled up in a rental car on a Friday afternoon, hugging Elena tightly on the porch before turning to me with a appraising look. "So, you're the guy everyone's talking about," she said, not unkindly but direct. We shook hands, and Elena suggested we all sit down for coffee inside. It didn't take long for the questions to start. Sophie waited until Elena stepped out to grab snacks, then leaned forward. "Look, Ryan, I love my mom. She's been through a lot with the separation. Are you serious about this? Because if you're not, if this is some rebound thing..." Her voice was protective, fierce even. I met her gaze steadily. "I'm serious. More than I've ever been about anything. I know the age difference raises eyebrows, I get it. But your mom makes me better, and I want to do the same for her. I know it'll be hard sometimes, but I'm not going anywhere." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but if you hurt her, I'll come after you. Journalist privileges, I know how to dig up dirt." We both chuckled, the tension easing. When Elena returned, Sophie shifted gears, asking about my job, how we met, even teasing her mom about finally letting loose. By dinner, pizza we ordered in, the three of us were laughing like old friends. Sophie shared stories from Chicago, her latest article on city politics, and I talked about my architecture projects. Before bed, she pulled Elena aside, but I overheard her say, "He seems good for you, Mom. You deserve this." The next day, we all went for a walk in the nearby park, Sophie linking arms with her mom while I trailed behind, snapping photos on my phone. When she left on Sunday, she hugged me too. "Take care of her," she whispered, "and thanks for making her smile like that again." As the days turned into weeks, Maple Grove adjusted. The whispers faded, replaced by casual nods. Mrs. Chun still watched from her window, but one day she even waved when we passed by on an evening stroll. Henry, the owner of the corner coffee shop, started calling us the regulars and slipped us free muffins now and then. "You two liven up this place," he said with a wink. Elena's school life normalized too. Parents stopped complaining, and she was invited back to staff gatherings. "It's like they've moved on to the next scandal," she joked one afternoon, planting bulbs in her garden while I helped dig. We turned those small victories into our routine, cooking simple meals together, her reading aloud from a book while I sketched designs, or just sitting quietly, her head on my shoulder. One evening as the sun dipped low, we set up a candlelit dinner in her kitchen. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad we'd made together. The flames flickered, casting warm shadows on the walls. Elena looked across the table at me, her eyes soft. "Thank you, Ryan," she said quietly, for not running when things got tough, for choosing this, us. I reached for her hand. Thank you for letting me in. I didn't know what I was missing until you. We lingered there, the world outside forgotten, knowing we'd built something stronger than the storm that had tried to tear it down. 1 year later, Elena and I were still in Maple Grove, and her blue cottage had become our shared home. I'd moved in gradually, first a drawer for my clothes, then my books on her shelves, until one day it just felt right to call it ours. We didn't make a big announcement. It happened quietly, like most things between us. The house felt alive now, with fresh coats of paint on the walls and little touches we'd added together. In the backyard, we'd planted a garden of flowers, dahlias, roses, and her favorite, carnations. She'd teach me how to prune them on lazy Sundays, her hands guiding mine in the soil. These were my grandmother's favorites, she'd say, smiling as the petals unfurled. They remind me that beauty takes time. Watching her kneel there, dirt on her knees and sunlight in her hair, I felt a deep contentment I hadn't known before. We took short trips too, escaping the town's watchful eyes for a while. Our first was to Lake Superior, a few hours north, where the water stretched endless and blue. Elena hadn't swum in over a decade, not since a family vacation with Mark and Sophie years ago. But on that crisp morning, she slipped into the lake, laughing as the cold waves hit her. I snapped photos on my phone, capturing her mid-laugh, arms outstretched like she was embracing the world again. I feel free, she said later, wrapped in a towel on the shore, her head on my shoulder. We picnicked with sandwiches we'd packed, talking about nothing important. The way the wind rippled the water, or silly dreams from our youth. Those moments solidified us, away from the gossip, just two people building memories. Back home, the town had shifted in subtle ways. Mrs. Chun, once our harshest critic, had softened. One afternoon, she appeared at our door with a jar of homemade strawberry jam, her expression almost sheepish. "Thought you might like this," she muttered, handing it over. "You two seem settled." We thanked her, and as she walked away, she even nodded. A small victory in a place where change came slow. Not everyone came around. There were still sidelong glances at the grocery store or hushed conversations at the post office. But the outright hostility had faded. Henry at the coffee shop greeted us with extra warmth now, slipping in free pastries. "You kids keep the place interesting," he'd say with a grin. Elena's life at school had rebounded too. After the initial chill, she was invited to advise the literary club, mentoring students on poetry and stories. "It's like they've forgotten the scandal," she told me one evening, grading papers at the kitchen table. "Or maybe they've just moved on." I was proud of her resilience, the way she'd held her head high through it all. At my firm, the ribbing had turned lighthearted. Jake would clap me on the back and say, "How's the missus?" And I'd smile, no longer defensive. "She's great," I'd reply and mean it. Work felt steadier too. I'd landed a bigger project designing eco-friendly homes, and Elena's encouragement kept me going on late nights. Sophie visited more often now, her trips from Chicago becoming a highlight. She'd roll her eyes at our domestic bliss, but join in, helping with dinner or teasing me about my cooking. "You're good for her, Ryan," she confided during one visit while Elena was out in the garden. "I haven't seen Mom this alive since, well, ever." It meant everything, knowing we'd earned her approval. We built routines around these visits, family dinners, walks in the park, and it felt like piecing together a new kind of normal. Through it all, we faced the lingering doubts together. There were tough days, a snide comment from an old acquaintance at a town fair, or Elena waking from a dream about her past life, questioning if we'd rush things. But we'd talk it out, often on the porch swing as the sun set. "Do you ever regret this?" I'd ask, my arm around her. She'd lean into me, only that I wasn't brave sooner. Her words always grounded me, reminding me why we'd fought for this. I realized then that true happiness wasn't about pleasing everyone. It was about living authentically, age be damned. Elena, who'd once believed love had passed her by, now woke up with a spark in her eyes, planning our next adventure or curling up with a book beside me. And me, the guy who'd been called too bland, had found passion in the quiet strength of choosing her every day. We hadn't married yet, no rush for rings or vows. But each morning, as I brewed coffee and she joined me on the porch, we chose each other anew. The whispers? They were echoes now, distant and powerless. One afternoon, as we sat on the steps watching the sunset dye Maple Grove in gold, I turned to her. Some days I look at you and I know, peace doesn't need an age. It just needs two hearts brave enough to choose each other. She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. And in that moment, everything felt right.